The blood was still warm when Arif Cole pulled back the sheets, a thin red stain spreading across the white like a secret that refused to stay hidden, and in that instant the quiet morning shattered inside his chest as if the house itself had exhaled a long-held lie. Sunlight poured through the window in clean, hopeful beams, but it only made the sight crueler, more unforgiving, because nothing so bright should have revealed something so frightening. If you are watching Broken Smill and you believe in hope, compassion, and second chances, this is the moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe, because this story begins where courage is tested most. Arif stood frozen beside the bed, the hum of the city outside drifting faintly through open windows, morning traffic and distant birdsong mocking the panic rising in his throat. He was a single father who had learned to read signs the way other men read books, the sound of his daughter's breathing at night, the way silence could mean trouble, the way small details mattered more than grand gestures. Since his wife's death 3 years earlier, he had rebuilt his life carefully, brick by fragile brick, keeping routines sacred and emotions tucked away where they couldn't wound anyone else. The woman sleeping in his bed had entered that life quietly, like a sunrise he never expected to see again, and now the blood felt like an omen, a warning that he had invited pain back into his carefully guarded world. Elara Vos had arrived in his life without fanfare, despite being one of the most powerful CEOs in the city. She never wore her power loudly around him. In the daylight hours, she ran a global healthcare company from glass offices and sunlit boardrooms, her name spoken with awe and fear in equal measure. In Arif's small house, she was simply a woman who laughed softly in the kitchen while making coffee, who listened when his daughter talked about school, who looked at him as if she saw not a widower or a responsibility, but a man still worthy of being chosen. He had known she carried shadows. Everyone with that much success did. But he had believed her pain was safely contained in the past. The morning air smelled of toast and lemon cleaner, ordinary things that made the blood feel unreal. Arif's hands trembled as he tried to think logically, the way he did in emergencies, but logic faltered when fear took over. His mind raced through possibilities, none of them gentle. He remembered the faint wince on Elara's face the night before, the way she had excused herself early, claiming exhaustion from travel. He remembered how she had smiled through it anyway, that practiced smile that CEOs perfect, a mask worn so long it becomes instinct. Now the mask had slipped, leaving evidence she could not hide. As sunlight climbed higher, Elara stirred, her breathing shallow, her face pale against the pillow. Arif watched her chest rise and fall, relief mixing with dread. Whatever this was, it was real, and it was serious enough that she had bled in her sleep without waking him. The house felt suddenly too small to contain the weight of what he did not know. Memories of hospital corridors flooded him, the sterile brightness of day wards where he had once held his wife's hand, powerless as machines beeped their indifferent rhythms. He had promised himself never again, had sworn his daughter would not grow up watching adults fall apart around her. When Elara finally woke, the room filled with a silence so thick it pressed against Arif's ears. She noticed the sheets immediately, her eyes flickering with recognition and something far deeper, a sorrow that settled into her bones. In the clear daylight, stripped of makeup and armor, she looked younger and infinitely more vulnerable. Arif saw fear there, not of pain, but of being seen. It struck him then that the blood was not the beginning of the story, but the end of her ability to hide it. The hours that followed unfolded slowly, like a long tracking shot in a film that refuses to cut away. Arif moved through the house on instinct, keeping his daughter busy with breakfast and homework at the sunlit dining table, pretending nothing was wrong while his heart pounded. Elara sat alone on the edge of the bed, sunlight tracing the curve of her shoulders, her posture rigid as if holding herself together required constant effort. The contrast between her public life and this private moment was stark. In daylight, there was nowhere for secrets to hide. Arif's thoughts circled back to his own past, to the mistakes he had made when he chose silence over honesty. He remembered how he had ignored the small signs with his wife, believing love could outrun illness, believing tomorrow would always come. That memory burned now, sharpening his resolve. Whatever Elara was carrying, he would not pretend it wasn't there. He would not let daylight pass without truth. As the morning wore on, Ilara's strength seemed to ebb, the confident lines of her body giving way to something fragile. Ariv noticed the way she pressed a hand to her abdomen when she stood, the way her eyes briefly closed as if riding out a wave. Each detail felt like a clue, each one tightening the knot in his chest. He realized that loving someone meant paying attention even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. By noon, the house was flooded with light, the kind of brightness that exposes dust in the air and cracks in walls. Ilara finally let the truth surface, not in words but in the way her shoulders sagged, the way tears traced silent paths down her cheeks. Ariv understood then that her secret was not scandal or betrayal, but something quieter and far more devastating. She had been living with a condition that threatened her health and her future, something she managed behind boardroom doors with ruthless efficiency, scheduling treatments between meetings, controlling symptoms the way she controlled markets. She had not told him because she had learned long ago that vulnerability could be exploited, that love was a risk she could not afford. The blood on the sheets was a warning sign she could no longer ignore, a reminder that even power has limits. In the harsh honesty of daylight, Ilara's carefully built world cracked open, revealing a woman terrified of becoming a burden, of being seen as weak, of losing the only place where she was not defined by her illness or her title. Ariv felt his own defenses crumble in response. He saw not a CEO, not a patient, but a human being standing at the edge of something frightening. The day stretched on, tension building not through raised voices but through the quiet understanding that nothing would be the same. Ariv's daughter played in the yard under the bright sky, her laughter floating through open windows, a reminder of what was at stake. Ariv watched her and felt the weight of choice press down on him. Loving Ilara meant inviting uncertainty into a life he had stabilized at great personal cost. It meant hospital visits in daylight instead of grief in the dark, hard conversations instead of comfortable silence. Ilara, in turn, watched Ariv with a mixture of hope and dread. She had lost people before when the truth emerged, watched affection turn into pity or fear. She braced herself for the moment he would step back, for the careful distancing she knew so well. The sun cast sharp shadows across the room, and in those shadows, she faced the possibility of losing the one place she felt safe. Time passed, measured by shifting light and the slow rhythm of breathing. Ariv remembered a promise he had made at his wife's bedside, not to let fear dictate his life. He realized that promise applied here too. Pain had already taught him what loss felt like. It had also taught him that love, even brief or imperfect, was worth the risk. As afternoon leaned toward evening, something gentle replaced the tension, not resolution, but understanding. Ilara's secret was no longer hers alone. In sharing it, she had given Ariv a choice, and in accepting the truth, he felt a quiet strength return, the kind born not from certainty but from commitment. The house, bathed in warm daylight, felt less like a fragile refuge and more like a place where honesty could survive. If this story has touched your heart so far, this is where Broken Smill asks you again to support it by liking, sharing, and subscribing, because stories like this live through the compassion of those who watch. Before the final moments unfold, take a second to comment what you believe Ariv should do when love and fear collide like this. In the closing light of day, Ariv stood by the window, watching his daughter chase shadows across the grass, while Ilara rested on the couch, sunlight soft on her face. The blood on the sheets had been washed away, but its meaning lingered, transformed from terror into truth. Ariv understood now that love was not the absence of pain, but the decision to face it together in the open, under the unforgiving honesty of daylight. Ilara, for the first time in years, allowed herself to rest without planning her next defense. In that shared stillness, they found something rare and fragile, the courage to believe that even broken beginnings could lead to something whole.